Hello and welcome to another year in my life. Not your life, but my life. You might have been alive, so it might reflect on you as well. Yes, I'm looking at yet another year, and it's another year for my early childhood. This year I turned 6, and these are the films that had some influence on me, either back then or at some point during my life that came out in the year 1979. So let's start as usual with a quick look at the US box office for the year. So at the top we got Kramer vs. Kramer, a film that I've only recently seen and it heartbroke me. Absolutely brilliant film. I'm not going to cover it in detail because it didn't influence my life. It's only one that I've latched onto recently. Amateurville Horror is in there, Rocky 2, Apocalypse Now, Star Trek The Motion Picture, Alien, 10, The Jerk, Moonraker and The Muppet Movie. I can safely say that I've seen all 10 of them, and most of them will get spoken about a bit more in detail because this was definitely the era that I was starting to become more aware of the world around me. And these films from this area, these films from this year, all had some impact on me. I'm not going to mention 10 because it's only got 2 things worth mentioning, and I'm not going to say what they are. I'll leave that for your imagination. So, production began this year on Empire Strikes Back in March. John Wayne passed away at the age of 72 from stomach cancer in June, and Don Bluth and some fellow Disney animators set off to make their own way in the world, creating the Don Bluth Animation Studios in September of this year. How did that turn out? I'm sure we'll get to it in following episodes when I cover some of the films or things that came out from them. Raiders of the Lost Ark also went into production in this year, and in the Oscars, Kramer vs. Kramer was the runaway Oscar winner, scoops a chunk of awards, whilst Woody Allen's Manhattan fared a lot better at the BAFTAs. So let's do a quick look through my films of note. Now, what I noticed when I put this together is there aren't as many films of note as what there were from previous years. Maybe 1979 was when it started to slow down before we hit into the 80s, and it's kind of like 83, 84, if I remember correctly, that things started to ramp up again with impactful films. But I'm sure as I do my research, I'll prove myself wrong on that. So let's start with Amateurville Horror. Now, I remember watching this when I was a kid and being absolutely chilled to the bone by it, and, you know, the whole possession aspect seemed to be absolutely marvellous. And then I went back to it and watched it as an adult, and it's not a great film. I actually preferred the remake of more recent years of this film, not just because it's got Ryan Reynolds in it, but because Ryan Reynolds is a lot more convincing as a really nice everyman who slowly gets warped and possessed. Now, the big controversy around the Amateurville Horror was that it was allegedly a true story, yet so many details don't quite live up to it. There's the fact that the priest who was brought to exorcise it and backs up the claims was excommunicated, so he's got nothing to do with the church anyway. There's also the fact that many people have lived in the Amateurville house and never reported anything strange, so why did it happen to these? Whether you believe it or not is all down to your own belief. If you want to believe in ghosts, ghoulies, spirits, spectres, that's fine. The rest of us will treat it just as the entertainment chilling thrills that it is. Not a terrible film. I was a bit mean before when I said that it's not very good. It's not a terrible film. It just lacks something. Worth checking out, just out of a matter of curiosity. Now, one film that is a great film and definitely worth checking out, and if you're wondering what this is something from his son's birthday cake. He celebrated his 18th last week, and it's a little gaming controller stab thing, and it's been sat on top of my desk and I've been playing with it. I've got 3 of them. Apocalypse Now. Now, war films can be good or they can be bad, or they can be completely and utterly bonkers. And Apocalypse Now managed to tread the line between absolutely amazing and completely utterly bonkers perfectly. The production on this film is a whole film of its own, and there's a documentary that got released that went into detail of what was going on behind the scenes, because this film is a product of everything that happened while they were making it. From the early scene of Martin Sheen trashing his hotel room, which was actually because he gone completely bonkers as an actor and started trashing things, and they just said, get the cameras in. Coppola just said, bring the cameras in, get rolling, we're filming this. And they used it in part of the film. Marlon Brando refusing to learn his lines and just basically saying whatever he wanted on set and mumbling away in that way that he tends to do. You got Robert Duvall in there. You got Lawrence Fishburne, who had lied about his age in order to get on the production because he shouldn't have been there. And Dennis Hopper is thrown into the mix. It's a great cast. It's loosely adapted from Hearts of Darkness, the novel about a journey into the Congo, but taking it into a Vietnam War kind of approach, with Martin Sheen being given one mission to go and find this absolute nutjob general who has set up a cult around him in the middle of the jungle, Marlon Brando. Brilliant film. There's been multiple cuts of it since. There's been the Redux and there's been the more recent cut. I'd say stick with the original. The other cuts add in some scenes that were taken out, but they kind of like interrupt the flow of the journey. So Apocalypse Now is a film that I latched onto in the early to mid-teens, and it became a regular rewatch. I absolutely love the film. There's some shocking moments in there, and if you don't like animal cruelty, then just look away when they bring out a cow towards the end for a ritual sacrifice, because that was a real cow. Definitely one that had an impact on my life, and definitely one that I still, to this day, go back to rewatch. So, we mentioned on past episodes that the 70s had a lot of disaster movies, and I was a big fan of disaster movies, so no doubt 1979 would give us some more disaster movies. Now, on 1978, we'd already seen how bad disasters could get with The Swarm. This year, we got a mixture of good, bad, and pure plain ugly. You've got, we'll start with the pure plain ugly. Airport 79, The Concorde. The stars were getting weaker. The cameos and the lineup was getting terrible. The plot line was getting absolutely bizarre, and the franchise was clearly laboured. Definitely one to avoid. Only try to grab an audience by going, oh look, we're going to use the Concorde. Everyone loves that Concorde. Cause if you were not alive during that era, oh my, you will not believe how people were just obsessed with this pointy-nosed aircraft. It was everywhere. Everyone was like, wow, amazing. It was a dark time. We didn't have computers. For bad, you've got Meteor. I mean, it's got a good cast. It's got Sean Connery. It's got Henry Fonda. It's got Natalie Wood, Martin Landau. But Meteor strikes hitting the earth. We've seen it done in the 90s as well, when it made a resurgence with things like Deep Impact, etc. It's not... the production values let the film down, and it doesn't quite live up to what its promise actually should be. Now, one which I consider good, though a lot of people dismiss, Beyond the Poseidon Adventure. Irwin Allen directed the sequel. It has Michael Caine, Sally Field, who I've got a bit of thing for, and Telly Savalas. And it literally starts just as the Poseidon Adventure ends. And it's basically a salvage operation to try to see if there's any valuables worth claiming. And two groups are battling to get the most valuable stuff. It's got thrills, it's got drama, and it's got Sally Field. What's not to love? Get it watched if you've never watched it. It's a worthy sequel. It's not as good as the Poseidon Adventure. I mean, of course it isn't. There's not many sequels that are as good as the first film, except for maybe the modern Planet of the Apes trilogy. We'll come to that in 20 years' time. Definitely one to check out. Give it a watch. Now, let's move on to comedy, because there was a good burst of comedy this year. We obviously needed a good laugh at the end of 1979, and boy did we get it. We got a vampire spoof with George Hamilton, in which Dracula gets evicted from his ancient castle and has to move to New York. Love at first bite. It sounds like it should be bad, and it probably deep down is pretty bad, but the comedy does work. There's some great moments. There's some saucy moments in there where it's making references to things of a more bodily fluid kind of nature. But It's fun, it's witty. I've not watched it for a good few years, but I remember chuckling away like a mad child when I was about 14 and got this on VHS. Absolutely well worth seeing. Now, one film that you probably have seen, and pretty much is notorious for being one of the funniest films ever made, is Monty Python's The Life of Brian. Now, earlier in the decade, they'd given us The Holy Grail, which I personally think is the best Monty Python film, but this is their best story film. Based during the time of Jesus, and it follows Brian, who was born at the same time as Jesus, and as he goes around his humdrum life, trying to find an identity in the world, and get involved in some liberating terrorists who are trying to bring down Roman rule. Hilarious satire, sorely misunderstood by religious people at the time it got released, to such an extent that you had bishops going on TV to talking with the Pythons and insisting that this is absolutely disgraceful, despite the fact he'd never seen it. It is not blasphemous. It plays more on the fact that, it plays more on modern day things where people look for like someone to lead them in rebellion, and it's pretty apt for this day and age that we live in. It's a genuinely funny film, and it's got some genuinely bonkers moments. Well worth seeing if you've never seen it. If you only know it by reputation, then you don't really know this film. Get it watched. It's a film that I'll go back to from time to time, rewatch it. Another film that I go back to from time to time, and I need to revisit because I've not gone back to it for about 4 or 5 years, is Steve Martin's first outing on the big screen, and that's The Jerk, a Carl Reiner comedy which sees Steve Martin play a white adopted son of a black family who's completely oblivious to the fact that he's not genetically their child. Grows up into an adult, goes off into the world, he's not the smartest of people, and Steve Martin's comedy style fits it perfectly. Absolutely hilarious. It was a great out-the-gates moment for Martin on the big screen, and it led to great roles in things like The Man with Two Brains and others going forward. Yet these days, Steve Martin, thanks to things like his turning, those attempts at bringing the Pink Panther back, etc., he's kind of lost the edge. Go back and watch The Jerk. Remind yourself of how funny this guy can be. Absolutely brilliant. Well worth checking out. One film that a load of people think that I'm absolutely bonkers because I get some enjoyment from, and we discussed this on one of our M-Tossers last year or early this year when we were covering the films of Steven Spielberg, and that's 1941. It's a war comedy with Dan Aykroyd, John Belushi, Nancy Allen, Robert Stack, and many more people popping up here, there and everywhere. It's chaotic, it's anarchic, it's basically Spielberg trying to do National Lampoon. Not quite hitting the mark, but you know what? It's got a charm to it that I kind of get drawn into. I latched onto this at quite an early age, and it's one that I went back to as an adult expecting, this is going to be terrible. My memory's going to be messing it all up. But I still found some enjoyment. It's by no means a great film, but it's not as bad as a lot of people try to say. Some people say this is the worst Spielberg film. No. Those people have clearly never seen Ready Player One. Fun, nonsense, some great moments, some moments that don't work, some moments that could have just been chopped out, but it's got enough in there to keep me interested. On the subject of comedy, one thing that got a lot of laughs round about the time was the TV series The Muppet Show. Muppet Show was great. Everyone knows the Muppets. Even today, they're still going with various TV shows. They've got a new one on Disney Plus. This year, we finally got the origin tale for the Muppets with the Muppet movie. The story is... it's an origin. It follows Kermit as he leaves his swamp to seek fame and fortune in Hollywood, along the way bumping into other Muppets who will join him on this adventure. Great film, loads of heart. I mean, when they did the Muppet movie, when they did the Muppets about 10 years ago, the more recent one, it adopted a similar kind of approach following a different Muppet finding his way in life. And this has the same charm. And it also has Rainbow Connection, which is one of the most iconic songs that the Muppets have ever delivered. That and are probably well known to everyone. Muppet movie, it's available on Disney Plus at the moment. If you've never seen it, get it watched, and then watch The Great Muppet Caper and all the others, because the Muppets just have a simple joy to them. They are absolutely brilliant for all ages. The kids will latch on to the simpleness of it. There's some subtle humour in there for adults as well, and there's cameos left, right and centre like you would expect from anything to do with the Muppets. So get it watched, enjoy yourself. Good waste of a few hours. We also this year had Quadrophenia, which was based loosely on the 1973 Quadrophenia rock opera by The Who, and it follows a mod played by Phil Daniels as he tries to gain recognition within the mod community, and also tries to get close to the girl that he loves, played by Leslie Ash. You've also got Ray Winstone and Sting as the iconic and enigmatic leader of the mod group that he wants to get involved in. And it's set around the time of the mod versus rockers conflicts that went on that led to the big clash in Brighton in the UK. It's a great film. There's some great performances on screen. I mean, you forget how good Phil Daniels could be and Leslie Ash could be. And Sting is perfectly well placed. He seems so distant and above everything that he stands out from the rest of the crowd. Great film. Worth checking out whether you're a fan of The Who or not. The Who were great at churning out rock operas. You know, with this and Tommy, two iconic rock operas that got made into films. We also this year got Rocky 2. They said at the end of Rocky there wouldn't be a rematch, but of course there was going to be a rematch. Rocky was a huge hit, so we got Rocky 2, where it was a chance to pit the two fighters together once again to see if Rocky could win. The whole story is very contrived. It's, you know, people thought that Rocky should have won on a technical victory, and he was the people's favourite, and that gets to Apollo Creed's ego, basically. It makes him feel, no, I'm not accepting this. I beat him fair and square, and I'll do it again. Rocky, determined not to get into another fight, he doesn't want to do it, slowly gets convinced, you need to do this will be great for, you know, your community and everything. It's another personal journey. It's the growth of the characters, and whilst it's not as good as the first film, there's something about the soap operatic nature of the Rocky films that even on the weaker films, you still want to follow the characters, you still want to see where they grow and where they go to. Well worth seeing, as are most of the Rocky series, and I say most because I will be talking more on a few of them in later years. One film that I've not seen from this year, which people are always shocked when I say, is The Warriors. And despite that, this is another one of those films that's on my list, and I know about the film, and I know the ins and outs of it, and I know apparently it's hugely influential, but I've not seen it myself, so I'm not going to talk about it in any great detail. Maybe once I've seen it, I'll talk about it on the podcast. Maybe it will be my challenge for the podcast from my co-host. Will remain to see. But apparently hugely influential on a lot of people. Didn't really impact on me. What did impact on me, and you should have twigged on this by now from the previous episodes, sci-fi. And boy, did Star Wars start something. Because in 1979, sci-fi was everywhere. Now, Bond had Moonraker come out this year and went all up into space with possibly one of the worst Bond films ever. It's the definite start of the decline of the Moore years, and it also cheapened the villain of Jaws, who becomes an absolute joke in this film. It's typical Bond adventure, only this time involving a space station and laser beams and nonsense. Not worth seeing, even if you're a big fan of the Bond franchise. This is the one that when I came to rewatch it, was like, well, I'm never watching that again after this time. On the flip side, we had Alien. Ridley Scott's film, which made a star of Sigourney Weaver, with a cast that include Tom Skerritt, John Hurt, Ian Holm, Harry Dean Stanton, Veronica Cartwright. If you don't know Alien, I mean, really, where have you been living? It's a horror in space. It's very subdued in the nature. It plays a grimy approach to space. It's not all flashy consoles and, like, you know, people wearing flashy uniforms. It is basically engineer works or transporters on a cargo ship, transporting something, get diverted to go and find out what this signal is that's emanating from a planet. Getting down there, one of them ends up with a alien creature, a face hugger, stuck to his face, and from that point onwards, things go rapidly downhill for the crew. It's tense, it's shot beautifully, it's disturbing. The design of the creature by H.R. Giger is absolutely... it's majestic. It's majestically, beautifully terrifying. And there's a very good reason it had such an impact that it spawned a whole franchise. What a film. I can immerse myself in this film forever and never grow tired of it. And the director's cut that we had in recent decades, I think actually tightened it up and made the pacing even better, turning it from an already excellent film to a perfect film. If you've not seen Alien, you really need to do yourself a favour and get it watched. It's always on at least one streaming service. Get on that and then go and buy it and actually reward the people who make the films. We also have, from this year, on TV, a TV series started up called Buck Rogers in the 25th Century. As what tended to happen in the UK on a few things such as Battlestar Galactica, the pilot episode and the following episode were cobbled together and released for a limited cinematic release for the UK audience. Gil Gerard and Erin Gray were the main stars, and it follows Buck Rogers as his space mission goes slightly askew and he's thrown through time and wakes up in the 25th century and has to adjust to life in that era. Now, that could form the basis of a great drama, and if they ever did a remake, it'd be like, the remake of Battlestar Galactica was, really like gritty and down to earth. In this instance, it's played for fun, adventure, and it's a Flash Gordon. It's basically another Flash Gordon. Enjoyable, a bit cheap and cheesy, but definitely had an impact on me during my childhood. I used to love watching the series on TV, and having a movie version of it was absolutely stunning. We also had The Black Hole, which a lot of people say is absolutely... they've got a lot of love for. Now, I did when I was a kid. I remember loving this. I loved, the characters in it. I mean, we had Anthony Perkins in there. We had Ernest Borgnine. We had Maximilian Schnell. We just didn't have much of a story. As a kid, I didn't care. I enjoyed the spectacle. I enjoyed the design of the ships. I enjoyed the little robots. One which was all broken and falling apart, one which was still trying to guide him along. Oh, so cute. I enjoyed the visual spectacle of, the big rolling meteor fireball coming through the ship while they're going across the bridge. Marvellous moments, but the film itself, when I rewatched it as an adult, it's not actually as good as my nostalgia said it was. And it's one that, yes, it impacted on me on the time. I had the pop-up book. There was a pop-up book that you could get, and I used to love that book. It was great. I don't know what happened to it. It's probably ended up in a charity shop somewhere. Ugh, now I'm starting to reminisce about pop-up books. Not worth seeing now that you're an adult, except out of morbid curiosity. Don't expect much going into it. However, one film that I recently went back and rewatched, and I've still got a lot of love for, despite some people don't like it, and that's Star Trek, the motion picture. This was the first big screen outing for the crew of the USS Enterprise. Kirk, Spock, McCoy, Scotty, Chekhov, Sulu, all there. Uhura's on board. They're wearing pyjamas in space. Let's ignore that era of the costume design. It wasn't good. Visually, a treat. Loads of people refer to it as the slow motion picture because it takes ages to do so many things. You know what? I don't mind that. I love it. It gives it a 2001 kind of feel where it lets you immerse yourself slowly into it. There's a whole section which is Kirk getting transported to the Enterprise that while it's in dry dock, the transporters aren't working, so they're going via shuttle, and it does a full fly around of the ship, the new upgraded design for the movie that takes ages to do, but I lapped up every moment of it. It's Enterprise porn for fans of Star Trek. I can understand how people who aren't fans of Star Trek would have gone, oh, this has been going on for 5 minutes. Are they ever going to get to this ship? The story has... Spock had gone off to go and complete all his like Vulcan, like completely leave Starfleet, return to his Vulcan way of life, and become in touch with his Vulcan side. But he kind of picks up a message. He feels a presence calling out to him, and that presence is the presence of a great cloud that is heading towards Earth. What it's coming for, no one knows, and the Enterprise is sent to go and find out. Absolutely marvellous. A great starting point for the series. Yes, it would be bettered by the next film, but it's not the bad film that loads of people try to claim it is. Loads of people try to claim that every odd-numbered film is terrible. The very first film out the gate disputes that. And that is basically the roundup of the films that had some kind of impact on me while I was growing up, that came out in 1979. Anything I've missed? Anything you disagree with? Any films that you feel that I need to see? And yes, I know I need to see The Warriors, so don't comment that. But anything that you want to raise about 1979, pop it in the comments below. And also, as always, if you want to highlight a film from upcoming years that you think I need to see, or I need to talk about in some way, shape or form, comment on that, and if I've not seen it, I'll get round to seeing it and see whether it actually deserves a mention. Like, subscribe and share. If you want to comment on anything, comment below. I love to read all your comments, and next time we'll be finally stepping out of the 70s and heading into the 80s. Thank you for watching.